Some people wait their whole life for the right moment. They wait for courage. They wait for money. They wait for someone to believe in them first. But the right moment never comes. Because the right moment is not found. It is made with one decision. Just one. Nolan was 27 years old and still sleeping on a mattress on the floor of his parents' house in a small city called Marin. His father, Edmund, was a carpenter whose hands had been cracked as long as Nolan could remember. Every morning before sunrise, Edmund left the house carrying a worn leather bag of tools, walking 30 minutes to the workshop because he could not afford the bus fare. His mother, Iris, sat by the window from early morning until late at night, her eyes straining under a single bulb, sewing other people's clothes with fingers that had lost their feeling years ago. The sounds of that house were always the same. The scratch of Edmund's tools being packed before dawn, the hum of Iris's sewing machine that never fully stopped, and the silence of Nolan, lying on his mattress, staring at a ceiling that had never once given him an answer. Nolan had a dream of opening a small printing business. He had carried that dream for 4 years. He had written the plan in a notebook that was now buried under old clothes in the corner of his room. He told himself he was waiting until he had enough money. Waiting until the right contact appeared. Waiting until life felt less uncertain. But the truth that he never admitted to himself was simpler and far more painful than any of those reasons. He was afraid. And so he waited. And while he waited, Edmund's back curved a little more each month from carrying heavy wood, and Iris's eyesight grew weaker from sewing in poor light, and the house grew quieter in a way that had nothing to do with sound. One afternoon, in the narrow street outside their house, Nolan stood watching a young man named Cole set up a small handmade sign outside an empty shop. Cole was 23 years old. Nolan had watched him for weeks carrying second-hand equipment into that shop, piece by piece, on a borrowed bicycle. Cole had no investor, no wealthy family, no safety net of any kind. He had grown up 3 streets away in a house smaller than Nolan's, with a mother who cleaned offices at night and a father who had left before Cole learned to walk. But Cole had made one decision 6 months earlier. He had taken every coin he saved from 2 years of part-time delivery work and signed a 6-month lease on that empty shop. His hands shook when he signed the paper. He told no one because he was terrified of failing in front of people who knew him. And then he simply began. He printed flyers for local shops. He printed menus for small restaurants. He printed banners for school events. The work was small. The income was thin. But the shop was real. The sign was real. The decision was real. Nolan stood in that street for a long time, watching Cole arrange his small workspace through the glass window. And something happened inside him that had never happened before in 4 years of waiting. He did not feel inspired. He did not feel motivated. He felt something much quieter and much more devastating than inspiration. He felt the full weight of time. He thought of Edmund leaving before sunrise with cracked hands. He thought of Iris sewing until her eyes burned. He thought of 4 years buried in a notebook under old clothes. And he felt the difference between himself and Cole so clearly that it was almost physical. Cole had been afraid too. Cole had shaken when he signed the paper. Cole had told no one because he feared failure. The only difference between them was not talent or money or luck or connection. The only difference was that Cole had made the decision anyway, while afraid, while uncertain. while everything felt wrong. Nolan walked home that evening and pulled the notebook out from under the old clothes. He sat on his mattress on the floor and read every page. Then he did something that took him less than 10 minutes, but had taken him 4 years to begin. He called the only printer supplier he knew, a man named Gregory, who ran a small supply shop on the edge of the city, and asked him if he would allow a payment arrangement for a basic second-hand machine. Gregory said he would think about it. 3 days later, Gregory called back and said yes. 2 weeks after that, Nolan cleared a corner of the living room while Edmund and Iris were both out. He set up the machine himself, following instructions he had printed from the internet. When Iris came home that evening and saw it in the corner of her living room, she stood at the door for a long moment. She did not speak. She walked slowly to the machine and placed both her worn hands on top of it very gently. Then she walked to her sewing chair and sat down and began working again without saying a single word. But her shoulders, which had been tight and curved for as long as Nolan could remember, were somehow different that evening. Slightly lower, slightly released, as if something she had been holding for a very long time had just been set down. Edmund came home an hour later. He stood in the same doorway. He looked at the machine. He looked at Nolan. Then he set his worn leather bag of tools on the floor very carefully, walked to his chair, and sat down. He said nothing either. But that night, for the first time in many months, he ate his dinner slowly, not in the hurried way of a man who is already thinking about tomorrow's exhaustion. Slowly, like a man who had just remembered that he was allowed to rest. Nolan's business did not grow fast. There were weeks when he earned almost nothing. There were nights when he questioned everything. There was one morning when he sat on his mattress before dawn and almost convinced himself that he had made a mistake. But then he heard the sound of Iris's sewing machine starting up in the next room, and he heard Edmund's bag of tools being packed in the kitchen, and he stood up. Not because he felt ready, not because he felt certain, but because the decision had already been made. And a decision that has already been made does not require courage every morning. It only required courage once, on the day it was made. 14 months after that evening, Nolan signed a lease on a small shop 2 streets away from Cole's. On the morning he got the keys, he walked home and placed them on the table in front of Edmund and Iris without saying anything. Edmund picked them up, turned them over in his cracked hands, and for the first time in Nolan's 27 years of life, his father's eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, from something that had no simple name, from the feeling of a man who had given everything he had for decades, and was finally holding the proof that it had not been given for nothing. Most people spend their whole life waiting to feel ready. They never feel ready, because readiness does not come before the decision. It comes after. The carpenter's cracked hands, the tailor's burning eyes, the mattress on the floor. None of it changes until one person in the room decides that today is the day. You only need one decision, but you have to make it while you are still afraid.